Hi guys, I'm RMN901 and I'm gonna do an annual week basically about the Marvel Comics annuals from 1994. So most of the comics are gonna be annuals, but not all of them. So basically I'm gonna start with Marvel Comics Presents 155, again from 1994, and this is the first story of this issue, but the last part of the Wolverine storyline called Pure Sacrifice. So basically Wolverine finds Abdrased, whatever his name is, and basically beats him and his demon hordes to save Tiger. Moving on now to Hydra. This is basically the terrorist organization called Hydra that you've seen in the movies and the comics and all that. They were founded by Baron Strucker in the Second World War, and they basically are about world domination. A lot of SHIELD activities going on there, and apparently them, AIM and Secret Empire are all former divisions of Hydra, basically just split apart from it. Some of the leaders have been Baron Strucker, Arnold Brown, Wilson Fisk aka Kingpin, his son Richard Fisk, the Red Skull naturally, and Madame Hydra. So I'm gonna move on now with X-Men 19 from 1966. So this issue introduces the Mimic, basically Calvin Rankin, who has abilities to mimic any trait of any person at all, and especially superhuman abilities. He tries to join the X-Men but is rejected, and then kidnaps Jean Grey and takes her to a mine where he's basically holed up. Apparently his father had tried to build a machine that will make his powers permanent. However, Mimic then realizes after he tries to use this machine that it's the opposite. His father actually made it to take away the powers, and he is mind wiped by Professor X, basically to just forget all about it, as his powers start to work as well. Anyway, moving on now to X Factor Annual 9. So basically annuals are just around two stories, one bigger story and then often a smaller one, or maybe more. The first story here is Contact, and this has two parts as well. Basically about Professor X and Haven having some kind of mind talk, going through her origins and all that. She tries to basically make a connection with Professor Xavier, but he still sees her as a villain. The second part of this story is about X-Factor basically are hired by S.H.I.E.L.D. to protect a canister, or something like that. And they're basically gonna move this storage device over to a different place. They are attacked. The convoy is attacked by this cyborg or android or something like that, and they manage to defeat the android, but the canister or whatever is opened, and out comes Professor Power, who basically fights them. There's a bit of a standoff in the end, and eventually though Forge decides to let Professor Power free to save the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. So I'm gonna do the second part of this issue. It's called Cleaning House. Now basically this is about Strong Guy, who is trying to handle Madrox's death. Of course, Jamie Madrox, or Multiple Man if you want. He was killed after the Legacy virus, and he basically had placed him at death's door, and Haven tried to save him, only it didn't work and he died. So we're gonna move on now with X-Force Annual Issue 3, or Annual 3. So again, two different stories. The first one is called In Deep, and it's about Moonstar going basically undercover in the MLF, otherwise known as Mutant Liberation Front. They are currently being led by Rainfire, a mysterious character, of course very powerful, and basically they try to work together with 3Ps, small kind of mutant liberating team in China, consisting of Jade Dragon and Collective Man. Collective Man is of course many different people in the same kind of character. It's complicated, but moving on. Basically the 3Ps is about saving mutants from the Chinese government, as the Chinese government has held them prisoners. The Chinese government tried to use China Force, basically their alpha flight of sorts, to fight 3Ps. So MLF and 3Ps work together, fight China Force several times, but in the end Rainfire basically twists the table and goes for China Force instead, or the Chinese government, as they basically offer more. So they fight Three-Piece. Three-Piece almost escapes, meets Moonstar, and she basically lets them go after she basically just agrees with their whole mission. Later on, she lies to Rainfire about this and basically tells him that they got the better of her and she failed. He, of course, knows the truth, but he can't prove it. So, revealing himself as Sunspot, he basically tells her that if I find any proof, I will get you. So, we're gonna move on now with that day's character, who is Jack-O-Lantern 2. Now, this is not Jason McIndale, but a second guy who I don't really know who is yet. He was introduced in Captain America 396, and is basically a gun for hire, usually hired by Red Skull. Moving on now with another story here called Tales of Suspense issue 51. Basically introducing Scarecrow, Ebenezer Lawton, as a main villain, and he fights Iron Man. He eventually fails. Moving on now with Doctor Strange, Volume 366 from 1994. This one is the third part of Strangers Among Us and will lead on to the annual later on, which is why I'm having this one in here. Basically, Wong had been corrupted by the new Sorcerer Supreme called Salome, basically to kidnap a guy who looks exactly like Doctor Strange, known as Dr. Stevens. So Salome will basically be torturing this guy to try to figure out where the hell Doctor Strange actually is, as she can't find him. The answer to where Doctor Strange is, however, is revealed to three Midnight Suns called Blade, Morbius, and Vengeance, as they travel down to the special sanctum that is Doctor Strange's sanctum, basically outside of existence. And they're led by Sister Nil, who is basically the guide in this dangerous place, and they find Doctor Strange, who tries to explain what is going on, about him trying to gain power enough to fight Salome using Dr. Stevens and Strange, this different Strange-like character. Eventually, though, there's a lot of back talk from both Vengeance and of Blade, and he basically just sends them back to Earth again. Moving on now with that day's, with Doctor Strange Annual issue 4, the last part of Strangers Among Us. So basically, we finally find out who Dr. Stevens and, of course, Strange actually is. Salome realizes this after a bit of tangle with both of them, and she basically tells them that they are manifestations of Dr. Strange's magic and some of her magic inadvertently used. Basically, they are the extreme versions of Doctor Strange. If he had gone for the Doctor part, he would be more like Dr. Stevens, and if he gone for for the magic part, he would be much more like Strange. As she explains this, Dr. Strange decides to use Dr. Stevens as a bit of a conduit or a host to fight Salome. So it's a big-ass fight, and eventually, though, they actually manage to defeat Salome. She escapes, and hopefully we will learn more about this in different issues. The second part of this issue is basically a Clea Strange story called Desperate Needs. Clea is, of course, Doctor Strange's wife from a different dimension. She is actually Dormammu's niece, I believe, and she basically leads rebels on a kind of misguided mission where she needs to be able to get into Dormammu's stronghold and basically contact Doctor Strange for help. So I'm going to move on now with Ghost Rider Annual 2. Now this again features Scarecrow. This is the same Scarecrow, only he is much scarier this time, kind of reinvented him. And he basically kills a lot of people. He tells a bit of a story about how he's basically a psychopath from the get-go, killing small animals, getting beaten by his mother. He fights Ghost Rider while he kidnaps people, and eventually he leads Ghost Rider down to a certain kill room that he has. Well, kind of kill room. Kill maze, I guess. A maze with walls basically by trapped people, and he basically just tells Ghost Rider that if you don't do what I tell you to do, I will kill these people, I will stab randomly until all of them are dead. Ghost Rider then says, yeah, go ahead, you still have me here and I will beat you. And then he beats Scarecrow. The second story of this issue is a vengeance story called Raising Cain. So basically, an older woman called Ruby Avedon is creating Kane, this kind of puppet of mass destruction, I guess, basically to take revenge on people who kills people like her in her neighborhood. But she takes it too far, and Vengeance gets news of this, and he attacks Kane and destroys the puppet. The third story here is actually John Blaze story. John Blaze, of course, being the original Ghost Rider. It's called Truck Stop, and it's about him meeting Linda Talltrees, who actually is Witch Woman from the previous volume, who he fights. She basically tells a story about her ex stealing her child and trying to get the custody for the child. However, as the ex comes along in his truck trying to kill her, Blaze basically gets the full story from the ex eventually after he stops him, and learns the fact that Witch Woman has basically told a lie, told the opposite of the truth, where she basically tries to manipulate the ex into giving custody to her instead. Eventually she is defeated by Blaze and taken into some kind of supernatural custody by Caretaker. So that day we have this character, who is the character of that day, Korath, a Kree kind of genetic engineer, otherwise known as Korath Tak. Yeah. Basically, he is a cybernetic engineer, founder of the Pursuer project, apparently, where they kind of developed some cybernetic warriors for the Kree. He has been in some of the MCU movies, I know, I think Captain Marvel and Guardians of the Galaxy, and he was introduced in Quasar 32. Now we're gonna move on now to Iron Man Annual 15, where it's called Minds in Collision, and basically it's about a controller who's called Basil Sandhurst, of course. He basically has taken control over Sarah Jessup, a very powerful telepath, and gained some of her abilities through her, and he basically takes slaves throughout the world. Eventually, though, this reaches Iron Man, who tries to come up with a plan to stop Controller, of course, and he basically is found out by the Controller very easily, and then is trying to... Basically, the Controller tries to take control over Stark. However, he fails, and eventually the power that's needed for this is too much, and it kills Sarah Jessup. This, in fact, causes a kind of flashback, power outage of a sort. Creates basically a guy or a creature, whatever, called Mindstorm, who basically attacks both of these superhumans, Iron Man and Controller, of course, and basically makes them see each other's side of things. Iron Man uses this to be able to fire off a shot against the very thing that is keeping Mindstorm alive, killing it, and however, Controller is placed in basically a massive coma, where he basically just can't think, and he's basically just stuck inside his own body yet again. The second story of this annual is called War Game, and it's basically about Iron Man trying to... he basically trains out in simulation, which he can't stop, and it gets just a lot more dangerous than it's supposed to be. Basically goes from 0 to 100 straight away, and apparently after he goes into the whole program through his mind, he manages to push out the hacker that has been doing all this, and we will later find out in future Iron Man issues about who this hacker is and what he's doing. So we're going to move on now to Avengers Annual 23. So this story is basically a first of two parts. It will continue in Thor Annual later on in the week. So basically Pluto and Loki make a plan where Pluto will go after Thor and Loki will go after Hercules, so that their respective fathers, Odin and Zeus, will not punish their respective villains. Basically just looking at regular villains doing it. So Loki goes down into Tartarus, which is the hell prison place for bad guys in Olympus, and he releases Typhon, Kotos, Argys, and some unnamed very old titan who is so old that it doesn't actually have a name. and basically tells them to attack Hercules. They do this, kidnap Hercules, and right before they do this, before they teleport away, Captain America recognizes Typhon and realizes that this must have something to do with Olympus, so he basically takes the Avengers over there. While they are going there, Typhon basically just corrupts Hercules' mind, making him believe that he is a foe of Zeus and that they all will go to Olympus to fight the Olympians. So Typhon basically places the Olympians into a certain flux mode where they are basically just ghosts, and the Avengers arrive. There's a big ass fight. Eventually Hercules gets his mind back together, realizes of course the truth, and we get to see Typhon's real appearance, his tentacles and all that stuff. Kinda gross looking actually. Anyway, long story short, the villains are defeated and tossed back into Tartarus once again. The second story here is called Master of His Own Destiny, and it features Vision. So basically Vision and Hank Pym, are having a bit of a sparring session, and some kind of glitch happens inside Vision's mind. This glitch is basically screwing a lot around inside of him, and eventually though his own defenses basically managed to defeat the glitch. Right, so I'm gonna move on now with Captain America Annual 13. So this first story is basically seen through Red Skull's eyes. It's called, Heritage of Hatred, and it's about Red Skull trying to find a box from Hitler actually, called Der Tag, otherwise known as the Day. He believes it to be a very powerful weapon, so he tries to figure out where it is. And so we're gonna do a little bit of time jumping here, and we go back to the Second World War, where Hitler gives this box to Red Skull for him to hide, to be found later on, decades later. Basically saying that this box will make sure that the whole world will remember me for the brilliance that I am, basically. So this is of course during the Second World War, Nazis all around, and Captain America, Patriot, and Spirit of 76, basically arrive in Nazi Germany to get this box, or to fight the villains. And the Red Guardian comes along as well of the Soviets to basically join them and fight along their side. Captain America defeats Red Skull, and the box kind of disappears. The Red Skull is placed in a certain suspended animation, and he will wake up decades later. Now, jumping forward to 1953, and the second Red Skull, called Albert Malik, is introduced, working with the Soviets in the Cold War against Captain America and the Americans overall. And basically he uses a Soviet kind of android called Electro to fight the new Captain America and the new Bucky. He manages to get the box, the Day, and seals it off inside his castle. Now back to 1994 I guess, and basically the Red Skull manipulates Captain America into getting inside Albert Malik's castle through all the traps and get to the box. Then Red Skull comes along and takes the box from Captain America. However, as he leaves, he opens the box and realizes that it's just basically junk. It's an Iron Cross, some pictures, some paintings, and a manuscript of his book Mein Kampf. Of course, it's all worthless to Red Skull, and Captain America turns up and defeats the Red Skull. Right, so the second story here is called Symbols, and it's about a friend of Captain America who is being buried, and his name is actually Clarence Duckett. Doesn't really ring a bell, of course. When Captain America is about to leave, some people are very upset about this colored person being buried in this cemetery, and they decide to vandalize the coffin. Before they do this, however, Captain America goes back, as Stephen Rogers, of course, and he basically tells the story of Clarence Duckett, about how he was a close friend to him in the beginning of the Second World War, and basically about how he found out the secret of Captain America, but even under torture he wouldn't give it up, and now he will make sure that his memory is honored, and if it isn't, by anyone, he will take offensive measures. Naturally, these guys just leave very distraught, very carefully. Anyway, moving on now to the next annual. It's called Annual Incredible Hulk Annual Issue 20. Sorry, the story is called Storytime. It's basically told by Abomination. It's just basically a fairy tale about him being a bit of a hero in this medieval fairy tale thing, and the Hulk being a villain, and he takes the curse of the Hulk basically for the Hulk to live a normal life like heroes do, something like that. Yeah, the second story here is called Psychobabble, and it features Doc Samson. So basically Samson comes in contact with a mutant who is going completely berserk with his powers, and apparently this young mutant had been abused by the world basically for being different, and well, Doc Samson basically just talks him down, saving the situation. The next story here is called Desert Storm, and it features Ajax and Achilles of the Pantheon. So they basically are on a mission in the Middle East to find this guy called Arabian Night. The Hulk basically said that he has very little information about this. It might even be a trap, so be on the lookout. However, Achilles is very skeptical when he meets the Arabian Night, and after a little bit of tussle, it basically ends with them being too late to save the situation, and a lot of people got hurt or even killed. So now we're gonna move on to the last bit for this episode, and it's basically about the Marauders. So the Marauders is a very interesting supervillain team, consisting of Scalp Hunter, Prism, Malice, Sabretooth, Vertigo, Harpoon, Arclight, Blockbuster, Riptide, and Scrambler. Now, they killed a lot of Morlocks during the Mutant Massacre, when they were led by Mr. Sinister from the kind of shadows. They caused a lot of damage to the to the X-Men as well. I mean, Scrambler basically just almost killed Shadowcat, making her go into a kind of sort of flux mode where she couldn't go out of phase mode, basically, so she almost starved to death. And naturally, we have, let's see here, Malice, who basically took control over Polaris and changed a lot for her. And who of course can't forget about the fact what they did to Angel, where they basically just crushed his wings, which would eventually lead him to get in contact with Apocalypse, who will later change him into Archangel. Right, so that is it for today. Thank you all for listening. I hope you have enjoyed. All of this is of course Marvel's content. I'm merely telling the story. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy this. And see you in the next part, which will be later on this week, continuing with the annuals. Okay, thank you and bye.